In cold, murky waters where visibility drops and movement becomes harder to interpret, a great white shark moves below, accelerating upward with explosive force, following a path refined by millions of years of evolution, a path designed for a single objective: to strike before the target can process what is happening. And in that moment, the target is not a seal. It is an orca, an animal that almost never finds itself in a position of vulnerability because its power does not come only from size or strength, but from its ability to anticipate, to coordinate, and to shape every encounter before it even begins. In most situations, that advantage is overwhelming because orcas operate with awareness, with communication, and with control of space, which means they are rarely surprised and almost never caught unprepared. But that dominance is not absolute, because it depends on conditions that are not always guaranteed. And when those conditions begin to fail even slightly, the entire system that makes the orca so effective starts to weaken. The great white shark, on the other hand, does not depend on control, and it does not require time to analyze or coordinate, because its strategy is built around immediacy, around speed, and around the ability to deliver a decisive strike from a position the target cannot easily detect. There are real places in the ocean where this difference becomes critical. Environments where light fades quickly, where the water reduces visibility, and where even a highly intelligent predator can be forced into reacting instead of controlling. In those rare conditions, the balance does not completely reverse, but it shifts just enough to create a possibility that almost never exists under normal circumstances. A brief window where instinct can act faster than strategy, and where a single, perfectly executed attack can change the entire outcome. The great white shark does not dominate the ocean by understanding it, and it does not need to coordinate or anticipate in the way an orca does, because its entire system is built around something much simpler and far more immediate: the ability to end an encounter before it truly begins, using speed, positioning, and a strike so fast that the target often has no time to react. Its body is designed for this exact purpose, with a dense muscular structure capable of generating sudden bursts of acceleration, allowing it to move from complete stillness to full attack speed in seconds, while its dark coloration makes it almost invisible from below, blending into the deeper water as it approaches a target silhouetted against the surface. If you find these real interactions between apex predators interesting and want to keep exploring how the ocean actually works, subscribe to this channel. You will see more of these encounters explained with real science and real locations. This is why its most effective attacks come from beneath, where it uses the contrast of light above to identify shapes, locking onto movement and committing fully to a vertical strike that can launch its entire body out of the water, delivering an impact strong enough to incapacitate prey instantly. In that moment, there is no adjustment, no hesitation, and no second phase. The entire hunt is decided in a single action, and this is where the difference between the shark and the orca becomes critical. Because while the orca depends on maintaining control of the encounter over time, the great white depends on collapsing that time into a fraction of a second, turning the entire interaction into a single, irreversible event. This means that the shark does not need to outthink the orca. It does not need to outmaneuver it over minutes. It only needs one correct approach, one blind angle, and one perfectly timed strike delivered before the orca can fully interpret what it is sensing. In most environments, this is not enough, because orcas are highly aware, constantly scanning and often moving in groups that reduce the chance of being approached unnoticed. But in conditions where visibility is limited, where light fades quickly, and where the ability to interpret movement is reduced, that awareness becomes less reliable, and the time required to process a threat begins to increase. One of these places exists off the coast of California, near the Farallon Islands, where cold, nutrient-rich waters attract large populations of seals, drawing both great white sharks and orcas into the same hunting grounds, not as direct rivals at first, but as predators targeting the same resource, which increases the chances of overlap. At the surface, everything appears clear and open, but just below, the water can quickly become darker and more difficult to interpret, especially in areas affected by depth changes, plankton density, and shifting light conditions, which reduce visibility and distort movement in ways that matter far more to an animal that depends on awareness than to one that depends on ambush. For an orca, control begins with information. It needs to track movement, interpret positioning, and maintain awareness not only of its target, but of the entire surrounding space, because its hunting strategy depends on coordination, timing, and the ability to anticipate what happens next. When a great white shark and an orca enter the same space under these conditions, the encounter does not begin with a clear decision from either side, and it does not unfold as a traditional hunt, because in this brief overlap, both animals are operating with incomplete information, and that is what makes the first seconds so critical. The orca continues moving through the water with awareness, scanning, interpreting, maintaining a mental map of its surroundings, but in reduced visibility. That map is no longer precise, and the time required to identify a fast-moving object increases just enough to create a delay that normally would not exist. Below, the great white has already committed. Its body accelerates upward along a fixed trajectory, driven by instinct and timing, locking onto a shape above that may not yet be fully identified, because the shark does not need certainty. It only needs alignment, speed, and the correct angle to deliver maximum impact. And this is the only window where the impossible becomes possible. Because if the shark reaches the orca before recognition is complete, the first contact is not a warning. It is a strike, delivered with enough force to disrupt movement, to create confusion, and to interrupt the orca's ability to immediately regain control of the situation. Because unlike typical prey, the orca does not collapse under pressure, and it does not rely on a single response. As its nervous system processes the impact, it begins to re-establish awareness, recalculating position, identifying the source of the threat, and preparing a response that is no longer instinctive, but strategic. This is why, even in the rare conditions where the shark can initiate the attack, the outcome is not determined by the strike alone, but by what happens immediately after, because the difference between possibility and success is measured in seconds. The shark's entire strategy is built around immediacy, around delivering enough force in a single, perfectly timed moment to disable its target before any reaction becomes possible. And this approach works with remarkable efficiency against animals that depend on escape or hesitation, but it becomes far less reliable against a predator that can absorb that initial shock and reorganize almost instantly. The orca does not rely on a single phase of attack, and it does not collapse under pressure, because its strength is not limited to impact, but extends into awareness, adaptation, and the ability to rapidly reassess the situation, regaining control even after an unexpected strike disrupts the initial balance. As soon as that awareness returns, the nature of the encounter shifts completely, because the shark is no longer executing a controlled action, but is now exposed within a space where it cannot dictate what happens next, while the orca begins to reposition, adjust, and respond with a level of precision that the shark is not designed to counter over time. In many cases, the situation escalates even further because orcas are rarely isolated for long, and the presence of additional individuals transforms what began as a brief opportunity into a controlled response, where coordination, strength, and strategy combine to remove any remaining advantage the shark might have had in the initial moment. This is why real-world patterns remain consistent. Because even though the great white shark can create a narrow window of opportunity under very specific conditions, it cannot sustain control beyond that first action, and in an environment where control determines survival, that limitation becomes decisive. The shark can strike first, and under the right conditions, it can even cause damage, but it cannot extend that advantage into a prolonged encounter, and once the orca stabilizes and takes control of the interaction, the uncertainty disappears and the outcome becomes predictable. Because in the ocean, dominance is not defined by who can win once, but by who controls what happens next. And in almost every documented case, once that control is established, the result follows the same direction. And that is what makes this encounter so fascinating, because it shows that even the most powerful systems in nature are still bound by context, timing, and environment, where a single moment can create possibility, but only sustained control can define the final result. Thank you for watching and for exploring how these extreme encounters actually work in the real ocean. And if you want to continue discovering how predators really behave beyond the myths, staying with the channel and subscribing helps you follow every new episode with deeper, real-world explanations.